article published by Bailiwick Express previewed a visit to Guernsey by a children's author who addresses LGBTQ+ themes in her writing. I personally was astounded by the comments on the associated Facebook post sharing that article. The sheer quantity of the comments surpassed anything I would have expected, and concerns were raised in the comments that the visiting author would be discussing themes with young children that she shouldn't be, and hundreds of other comments then followed, taking the conversation in different directions. In light of the interest in this article, we invited a number of guests to come in to discuss it. One of the women commenting on the article, opposing the visit of the author, was asked to come in but declined. Ellie Jones from Liberate accepted the invitation, and she brought Tina Burry and Joni Nettleship with her for a roundtable discussion behind the headlines.
It's a very strange sort of response to an article by some people about an author coming over, a very highly acclaimed, prize-winning author to do a creative writing lesson, I believe. Just happens to be LGBT. You know, some of her characters reflect her, some of the stories reflect her, and experiences of LGBTQ people, and that's really important, obviously, to reflect the whole of society. And yeah, it seemed to get hijacked. I know I will use that word, yeah, hijacked by one particular person, a few different people also sort of commenting. I would say a sort of vocal small minority, who then decided that it had something to do with gender ideology, using their own words, within schools, even though that was not what the article was about at all. So, and then it went off on some really, really kind of bullying, anti-LGBT language. I'm very passionate about young LGBTQ people being represented, having information, other people who aren't LGBT, who are younger, having information, stopping bullying in schools. It was kind of really depressing to read somebody almost advocating for the opposite of that.
Joni and Tina, how did you feel then when you saw some of these comments?
Well, to be honest, I try and stay away from the comment sections of much of social media, because I do find that they can be quite bad for your mental health, to be honest. I don't think that there are spaces where people treat each other with respect on a regular basis. And particularly around something like Pride, where sometimes negative comments can appear. So I wasn't really aware of it until someone drew my attention to it. And so then I did take a deep breath and have a look. And it's just so disappointing. It's so disappointing. And particularly, while unfortunately you do come to expect sometimes that sort of negative rhetoric, particularly on social media, the fact that it was just so misinformed and so irrelevant to what the story was actually about. And as Ellie said, I think it was really a hijacking of someone who had their own thoughts in their minds and made a really tenuous link to this story, when in actual fact it's an author, a really acclaimed author, as Ellie said, coming to teach our local children skills in writing, which is a really fantastic opportunity for them. To put such a negative over it with such irrelevant focus, disappointing, but still not surprising, sadly.
Yeah.
And hugely reflective on Guernsey. I hate to think what that author thinks of Guernsey by reading that, because you do, unfortunately, you might have 400 of those 500 and odd comments being super positive, but you do focus on the negative stuff. I'd be really interested if we got hold of the author to see if she'd seen it, what she kind of thought, and I just think it reflected terribly on Guernsey, where that's actually, the 6,000 people at Pride is reflective of Guernsey, because they're real physical people that were there, and it just reflects horribly on Guernsey.
I think what I found is the danger in not really understanding what the LGBTQ community over here is about, and the very dangerous rhetoric of drawing parallels between LGBTQ and paedophilia, which whips up a lot of emotion. Understandably, a lot of people who think that children are in danger, that people who are LGBTQ are sexual predators, or are just overtly sexual by nature. And that seemed to be the theme of this thread, which really needs pushing back. It was only about 40 years ago that we had Clause 28, which was a law in England, and Ellie and Tina probably remember it, as I do, which made teaching or promoting homosexuality illegal. That was brought on by a very famous book, which was brought out just showing a girl who had two dads. So we can't be complacent when we have these kind of narratives cropping up in our social media and in our, in our homes, because it's not just, we're not always able to have these kind of discussions. And I'm really sad, and I really mean it. I'm really sad that we don't have somebody representing some of the views that were spun, so that they can learn, because there is such a taboo around child sexuality, and there's such a taboo around LGBTQ, and not within our community, but people are fearful and people are ignorant, and then they start making connections where there really aren't any.
There was a woman who, from what we could tell, had made the first comment on our Facebook post, really drawing these comparisons and questioning why why gender theory was being promoted in island schools. On that, actually, just quickly, I'm definitely not an expert. I'm clearly not as well read as you, Joni, with some of the evidence you just gave there. Was there any link with gender theory? Did I miss something here? I just saw this as a creative writing exercise. I did not see any link with gender theory, but I do accept that I'm not an expert, so maybe I completely missed something.
It depends on your interpretation, doesn't it? Gender theory, it doesn't even mean anything. People will take what they want from it. I had to Google it because I didn't understand, and I've been part of Liberate for years.
Yeah, I mean, I had a look just after this had sort of started coming out at the books that this author writes, because again, I don't really know what gender theory means.
Yeah.
And so I thought I'd have a look, and the books seem to be really nice stories aimed at children.
Year 6 upwards mainly.
Yeah,
like
sort of quite young
adults.
Yeah, and about life, things that happen in life, and yes, perhaps two mums or single parents, or just reflective of a diverse society as we have.
There's a donor mum as well.
There's a donor mum, or a child having feelings maybe for someone of the same sex. They're
just diverse
really
books.
Lovely little. They look quite short stories. They're not big novels or anything. And I think you said in the story on Bailiwick Express that the author was proud to be able to represent people, particularly from her own life experience, that she didn't see represented elsewhere, which is really important. Because if you are at school and you've got two mums or two dads, or one mum or one dad, or you're looked after by your grandparents or whatever, and there's no one like you in any of the stories in the library, do you feel seen, insignificant?
And that's how we all grew up, wasn't it? We didn't see ourselves represented in books and stuff, but as Joni said, through Section 28, that we weren't represented.
I mean, my children grew up with two mums in the main, and they encountered a little bit of teasing. My son in about year 6 from some of the other boys. That was it.
I think just and going back to what the theme of some of the comments was, and to Joni's point previously, I was left with so many questions, and I was really hoping that we would have someone here from putting those points of view out that I could ask them to, because there did just seem to be, as I said before, the misinformation starting point of that somehow LGBT equals sex. That seemed to be the starting point, and that by talking about LGBT relationships, you're talking about sex and sexualising children, and I just didn't understand the jump. And I think that I can only guess now, because I can't ask the question, that comes from a real lack of understanding of what LGBT relationships look like. That, yes, we argue about the washing up, and sometimes someone's got a headache, and it seems to be a perception that LGBT people are overtly sexual and not just living relationships as supportive, loving, loyal, sometimes irritating partners.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be good to have that relationship in a book from an early age so that people were educated and understood? Because one of the main narratives seemed to be, I want to protect our children. Our children need protecting. Well, we all agree with that, you know. Ellie's done safeguarding training. I'm sure Tina has. I've done it. You know, we all want to protect our children. Protect them from what, though? That is what we would like to know. Protect them from what? Because the only people that my children need protecting from are from people who have views like that.
We did invite into the studio the woman that we believe had posted the first comment on our Facebook post.
I believe as well, just to clarify as well, that person that, I assume we're all talking about the same person, that did post that first comment also then reposted a similar rhetoric on Guernsey People Have Your Say with your article that repeated what they said, even though what they'd said was incorrect. So it came across very much as someone really, I'm really sorry to say it, but stirring up hatred and bullying a minority group just to fit an agenda that they've got, that they've misunderstood from an article. It seems a very strange thing to do.
And I just think it's important that we make clear, in case listeners haven't looked at the comments, it wasn't just one comment that then ran away with lots of other people. That person that was the original poster continued to respond, post, repost, etc.
And she has given us a very lengthy statement, which the majority of the statement is around gender theory, which, as we said, that's not a theme, that's not a term, it's
not one we use.
Frequently used.
No.
Okay. About parents who are concerned about this wish for all children to be embraced as they are, without being suggested repeatedly that they may have a specially labelled gender identity based on their personalities and preferences, nor creating the association of gender with a divisive special status.
I'm assuming what they mean is being exposed to the fact that trans people exist.
Potentially, yes.
And I think unless somebody...
I think lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender people, I don't think it's just about the T.
So when we look at... we are normally talking about the T is what people are afraid about or people learning about. And I think unless we're going to sit there and deny the fact that trans adults exist... which I don't think anyone is going to do. The government affirms that trans adults exist. The health, services affirm gender affirming care. Us
my
as
eyes.
My
eyes and knowledge confirm that they exist.
And we all know, or most people now know somebody trans. If trans adults exist, trans young people exist as well, and hiding them from people doesn't do anybody any good apart from create shame around people's identities. And I actually go into schools and I talk about LGBT identities. I don't talk about what do you call it, gender theory. I say trans people exist. This is what it means to be trans. Some people feel actually that their body does not match with the sex they were assigned at birth, and some people may make some steps to transition. And that is as much of gender theory that people have in lessons in schools. It's the people that talk about LGBTQ sex will be the SHRE nurses because they do sexual education, not other people, doing PSHCE lessons. So,
and to be clear, that's not in primary school and that is not in infants, because again, I think there is misunderstanding and misinformation. People thinking that very young children are being taught about gay sex. That is not the case.
Just like very young children aren't being taught about heterosexual sex. It's the same. And just like they're not being taught A-level maths.
It's just a miscommunication of fact, and that's why it's...
I think.
Well, I don't know. That's why it's important to come here and actually readdress some of the things that were Liberate was accused of, because they were quite hefty accusations, really.
As we said, so we did invite the lady in today. She declined the invitation. But actually, is it helpful then, from your individual point of view, to have these conversations with people who have opposing views? Can that be addressed through
We
just
love
talking?
it, and we love talking about these things as well. And it's not a question of, I hope you come around in time. It's about, do you know anybody who's trans? Let's have a conversation with somebody who's been through this. Would you like to ask some questions about what's taught in school? Have you got any questions for me as a as an LGBTQ woman who's brought some children up. Would you like to find out really what this is all about, rather than just assuming? Because that's when the trouble starts, and that's when the fear gets whipped up, and that's when hatred comes, and we can't afford to be complacent and let that happen.
Okay, I'm going to start with some of the comments then on our post, actually. The world has gone mad. This has got out of control. I'm presuming that comment is relating to
the gays.
Diversity and inclusion getting out of control.
But comments like that, though, where people feel like this has got out of control, is that the message then? Are we saying that being diverse and an inclusive society has got out of control?
Apparently so by some people.
It's really upsetting, isn't it? You look back at when Section 28 came into force and you think, well, over 40 years, how can we still be here? And some of the comments were like, oh, I'm sure we've all moved past this, think we're better than that now. Well, we're not, are we? Obviously, it's very clear, and we need to work hard to make sure people understand.
And it's just so bizarre. Like you say, the comment itself sort of is a bit meaningless, yeah. But if we're relating to representation in arts, literature, etc. I know it's gone mad that women are so represented now as well.
How dare we?
They're just the same tropes and conversations, but with different targets. Mm-hmm. And it's been ever thus, unfortunately.
Yeah, Joni, one comment that's just caught my eye, and you actually referenced this. So from a man who's commented, claiming that in Year 7, Liberate came into a personal development lesson.
So that would have been me.
It would have been
100% been me.
They gave us a set of tasks to do regarding all that gender and sexuality stuff, and they straight up showed a video of LGBTQ people kissing each other, which went on for about 5 minutes.
So you'll notice that it's actually the only comment that I did comment, because as I said, if people do post something directly about Liberate, then I sometimes will comment. And I posted the video on there explaining to them, this is the video they watched, and the share nurse has also shown it in Year 6. And it is called Love Has No Labels, and it actually has people, so it's a big x-ray machine in the middle of a shopping mall, and different people from various different minority groups.
I've seen this video, yeah.
That's the video. And the idea of it is people are behind this screen, you can only see their skeletons, so you don't know who they are, or who they're in love with, or what type of love it is. It could be a friendship, could be family, could be a relationship. And it covers sexuality, it covers race, religion, disability. So
all your protected characteristics, many of them.
It certainly does not just have 5 minutes of LGBTQ people kissing.
It's a boring video for anyone to watch.
Well, I sense-checked it with my kids as well, because they've been in Ellie's lessons all throughout their high school careers, and they honestly laughed when they heard that. They went, no.
I'll tell you what that Year 7 lesson, what we do. So we start that Year 7 lesson off with watching that video, and we talk about the different minority groups. We ask the people in the class to name the different minority groups.
Can you just remind people who don't know what Year 7 is, that it is high school?
High school, so first year of secondary school. Mm-hmm. And so we go in and we look at that video, and then we talk about the different minority groups and get the young people to give some suggestions of how people from those groups have been treated differently, potentially. Mm-hmm. So then we get to the, somebody will always highlight that there's gay couples in there too. So then we move on to that a bit later. So initially we just talk about different minority groups. We then play a game with lots of little figures that have got different colours, different sizes, different shapes of people, and we get the young people to make little groups of different families. So they're in a race, and they have to kind of split them up and put them into different groups. So they then come up with all sorts of different groups. Like real life, they make all sorts of different families: single-sex parents, single parents, grandparents, your nuclear 2.4 kids, etc. And we come to the conclusion that families are made in all sorts of different ways. So then we look at one type of those families that they've come up with, i.e. same-sex couples, and we look at some different same-sex, LGBTQ celebrities, and we talk a little bit about them and their identities, and then we literally look at the letters LGBTQ, what letters they stand for and what those words mean in a really, really super basic way. And then we do about a 10-minute session on how using the phrase "that's so gay" or "this is gay" just installs into their friends who might be LGBTQ that being gay is bad. because they use the word gay for everything, for like stupid, annoying, haircuts are gay, music's gay, homework's gay. And we explain how damaging that can be to young LGBTQ people to hear that something they innately are is stupid, annoying, disgusting, all of those things. And we talk about anti-bullying, and that's the biggest message we have in our lessons, and that's our Year 7 lesson.
Okay. But what I find really interesting is how this conversation is flowing itself off the back of these comments.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think of an analogy, and I haven't been quick enough on my feet, I'm afraid. But I can't imagine, take away the LGBTQ author, if it was crime author or some other genre of author, where you would find the conversation have gone off to where we have found ourselves. It just wouldn't. And it goes back to and I'm going to use the P word, it's starting from a prejudice point of view. It has to be, because we wouldn't find ourselves doing it with any other genre.
Yeah, the story itself was quite innocuous.
Yes.
So if it had been
It had
a
nothing
crime
to do
author
with-
coming to talk
Yes.
to young people interested in creative writing as part of any other event, they do. For the literary festival, there are authors that come over, representing all genres.
And maybe some of them are gay.
Yeah,
some of them have been, and some of them, and because again, it's that link between children and LGBT
Yes,
stuff.
and it's so dangerous. Back in the 80s, it was very much, and I remember this as a child in the 80s, that link between a gay man and he wants to have sex with children. It was everywhere, and it's taken a long time to break that, and it's forming again, and it's just got to stop.
And it's the same wording. It's like danger to children,
Protecting our children,
moral fabric of society,
their innocence,
sexual deviance, all this, and it's just been aimed at trans people this time instead of gay people. And you also see on some of those comments on these threads and stuff that then it slips into this people talking about grooming and all sorts of it's horrific to sit there and listen to and watch for people. It's so damaging.
And again, children are abused, exploited, sexualised, harassed without LGBTQ getting involved. It happens on a daily basis. Some of the comments on there are that, no child should be exposed to any kind of perverted distortion. And I think that speaks volumes, doesn't it? A perverted distortion of what? Of the norm. And we've got to really make sure that we are calling this out, because before you know it, we're going to find ourselves, with the rise of a lot of a far-right ideology across Europe and the globe, we're going to find ourselves back in a Section 28 situation. And I really, really hope we don't. But
well, that's essentially what this person's called for, isn't it?
Yeah, the removal of the neutralisation of curriculum to take away LGBTQ narratives.
And this is a question I would have loved to have asked, is that I don't understand what the neutralisation means, because, and this goes back to the prejudice point, it has to be that there is something inherently wrong with the LGBT relationships, because if LGBT relationships are sexualising children, why are heterosexual relationships not sexualising children? And then how would we not expose children to any relationships at all? And how would that be healthy? So it has, and I really wish I could ask the question, because I presume by some of the comments that the way the author wrote them, that she is married. So is her relationship with her husband sexualising her children? I would have liked to have asked her that question, because I would assume the answer would be no. But so then why is, Joni bringing up her children with her partner, sexualising her children?
And the implication that I am somehow putting my children at risk from myself, that doesn't make any sense. I have, my children are a danger from me.
Only if you're in a same-sex relationship, because not outing you, Joni, but the bisexuality means that you could be having a relationship with either, but one would be fine potentially to this person and one wouldn't, and that's really interesting to me.
Sometimes, sometimes I'm bisexual as
I'm
well.
pansexual, actually. Ellie, get it right.
Well, we're now
Get
going to have to explain
right.
what pansexual is.
No, I'm going to Google it.
Another comment on our post: people with traditional family values should be given the choice to take their children out of these events. Traditional family values, I'm presuming, are a mother, a father, 2.4 children, got a dog, maybe a cat, and you go on
I
holiday
guess
and
so.
I don't know, what is a traditional family value?
My traditional family values, I think, would be loving, caring, supporting. Let's make sure we sit down for dinner as regular as we can and have a good chat.
I think we mean straight parents.
I think we know what traditional family
Straight
values in
parents.
inverted commas means. It does mean 2.4 children straight.
And you look at so many of my kids' friends, who've got families who are completely diverse. Some brought up by grandparents, one's been brought up by mum, some have split, one, it is, there are gay families, heaven forbid, those children have turned out okay. I don't know quite, I don't understand that jump from a gay relationship being so dangerous.
To go back to that comment about we would like to be able to take our children out of these, it's a bizarre fear of awareness, and catching the gay, I think. Like by knowing about it, you'll suddenly become gay or become trans.
Another comment that's caught my eye.
That's not how it works.
Messing with their heads early doors, not good. I'm presuming that is what you're saying, Tina, that if you expose a child to...
Have they ever taught infants? Because, infants know their own minds. I've taught reception up to year 6 for years. And first of all, you don't go in and you don't talk about sex. You don't talk about things that aren't age appropriate in any subject, like Tina said, not A-level maths. And the lovely thing is, when you actually do sit with infant children and you listen to them talk, they are not born prejudiced. They are not born with these ideas. They don't see those differences. They really don't. And I'm coming from a place of experience as well. And I think that's important. You need to have some experience of some of these things before you can start forming some very dangerous sentences. Children's heads aren't messed with. What happens at school is that a national curriculum is formed by a government. You don't get a say as a parent in anything, If you don't want your child to be at school, home educate them. I did that with one of my children. School wasn't for him, so I took him out of school. Take them out of school, fine. But don't whip up this fear and frenzy that things are happening that aren't.
And it's also, I think somebody sent me a comment that said, parents aren't aware of this. Parents are aware of this. They get sent a PSHCE book that tells them exactly what lessons go on in the year. And actually Education this year have brought it back in-house because it's part of the curriculum. It has to be embedded throughout the schools. So actually it's going to be done throughout the whole of the schools, and it'll be completely embedded so that LGBTQ young people feel accepted and included. So it's just going to be part of the curriculum, and just like maths, you can't take your children out of certain lessons unless there's certain circumstances. And if you really want to do that, then do that. But that's not going to make LGBTQ people not exist.
And it doesn't mean that your child isn't going to be exposed online, on TikTok, through discussions. You're not going to really be doing them any favours. But again, if that's your personal choice, how you bring up your child. And I wouldn't force my gayness down anybody's throat. I think that's another fear, isn't it? Is that we are going to be, don't push it down our throats. Well,
it's that thing of is a straight couple walking down the street holding hands, pushing straightness in my face? No, it's just people being in a relationship. And I think, I always hark back to the fact that, when we grew up, as Joni and we've said, Section 28 was in place that meant that we weren't represented in schools, we weren't talked about, even LGBT teachers weren't open about it.
We were in school, and it was the biggest shame word in our school was to call another girl a lesbian.
Yeah.
And you'd whisper it under your breath, lesbian. It was the worst slur.
Yeah, it was, and we've still got sort of those sorts of hang-ups. But essentially, I was brought up by heterosexual parents. I went to a school that hid LGBT stuff, and everyone was heterosexual. And then somehow, I don't know.
It's that rainbow that you've stolen. That's what it is. You stood under a rainbow.
I've got the rainbow. I stuck it in my pocket, and I think one, and he'll love this if he listens to this. That made me laugh the most is I think we all know Horace, don't we? From across the board, and I think one of his comments was, "Give us back our rainbow." And it's like Horace, if the LGBT rainbow is 6 colours, you've still got your 7-coloured one. I'll send you some crayons so you can do one. We'd like to do a podcast with Horace.
Yeah, I would. I'd love that.
But going back to the point about school content as well, you know, and it's just back to this prejudice point, sorry to keep banging on about it, but so it's really important that parents know the content of these lessons that are covering LGBT, and how much interest are they showing in the content of every maths lesson and every physics lesson. You know, are they vetting all that as well? Now, as Joni said, you have the right legally to choose how to educate your children, but the point of education is about awareness. It's not about indoctrination or catching, you know, it. So I think if you are going to block your children learning that this exists, you are not preparing them for the world. Much like, I don't have a religious household. All schools pretty much have a Christian roots, and that gets taught. But thankfully, later on, when they get a bit older and I'm able to understand the nuance, they also get taught that other religions exist. And so I allowed my child to go through that process so he has an understanding. And should he have chosen to want to be a Christian? Great, fine. But, you know, he's made his own choices through the education that he's received. Now, obviously, choice around religion is different than sexuality and identity, but I'm just trying to make the comparisons that education is merely awareness, and if you want to prepare your children for the world, then keeping them away from certain subjects, in my opinion, is not really very wise and is not what education settings are supposed to be doing.
Well, the government has said that it's wrong as well. You know, teachers don't just choose what to teach, they are told what they need to teach by experts in their field. So, you know, we have to trust that the curriculum is going to represent all the different subjects and that teachers are going to deliver it in the best way possible. And I think, you know, they do. I love teachers, I love schools, I think that they do brilliant stuff. And all of my children were brought up by two women in a very stable, in a very loving, in a very happy environment. And they have all turned out to be very open-minded, to question everything, to accept and celebrate diversity. Accept's the wrong word, I don't like that acceptance word. Celebrate diversity. To the point where they don't even think about it. You know, I said I was going to come on and do this, and I thought it'd be like, oh wow, they don't even care. You know, they don't even... It's just a different world that they're living in now. Young people are amazing and they are surrounded by amazing people. And I think Liberate does a fantastic job and has done a fantastic job of supporting people who had no representation in school, who may not have supportive parents, who may not have supportive friends, hopefully not. But there has been one place that they've been able to turn. And I know that... you know, the kids, the teenagers and young people, they all love Ellie. They do.
But to your point before, though, I know you said it as a bit of a joke and a bit flippantly, but all of your children were brought up by two women in a relationship and are all straight.
I know, I can't believe it. I'm still waiting.
Parents, and both the sons are gay.
I can't wait for them to be gay.
It doesn't work like that.
I know. I keep saying, are you sure, none of you? Like, are you sure? But they, you know, none of them got curly hair either. So, and the thing is, they know as well that is absolutely not a big deal. And I just feel really proud of them as individuals who are who have no fear of people who are different, and they understand things which other people don't, and they don't make the wrong connections because that is dangerous. And I that's what education's about.
And I think actually that comes down to the lived experience. They are living now in a generation that is so much more diverse, so much more open. And so they're not making these sort of wild assumptions about those other people, because they are the other people and they can see that everybody's just cracking on and having quite a jolly time.
There's some really interesting statistics starting to come out. So about 10 years ago, there was a YouGov study that was done in London, and that kind of showed that 49% of 16 to 26-year-olds identified as something other than heterosexual. And, you know, people are like, well, it's kind of, you know, it's in London, half the city half the world runs there because they're gay, you know. But actually that's been replicated across the globe, like just generally, that younger people now, up to about 50% of young people stick themselves in the LGBTQ bracket. So, you know, if we just have to sit and wait things out, things will change. You know, like you're going to have, if you've got nearly 50% of young people being more open about their sexuality, their gender identity, virtually the whole lot of the community are going to be their friends, their family. And, you know, this is how things change. There aren't any more LGBTQ people than ever existed. There's just a knowledge of, that's not the only route that I have to take.
I think that's a really important point to make, is that it's not about there being more, it's just about people being able to be more themselves. And I do think, so in my job, I get some emails from people with some pretty strong points of view on this. And I think the concern is that there's a recruitment process, you know, that we're trying to like boost our numbers or something. And even though I'm saying that in a bit of a jokey way, it does seem to be a genuine fear. So I think it's actually really important to put forward that we don't care. We don't care if you're gay or you're straight. What we care is that if you're gay, LGBT, and that you are well and that you are happy and that you're able to be yourself.
Yes.
If you're straight, we also want that for you. You know, that's all it is. And, you know, so that brings us almost full circle that we want to protect our children.
And we all want to protect children.
Yes.
You brought this up before, Joni, that some of the comments were very much around we want to protect children from XYZ, LGBT, whatever they're wanting to protect children from. But actually, everyone wants to protect their children.
Yes. But some children are LGBT, so we have to protect
who
them
are you
as well.
protecting them from?
We have to protect them as well.
Indeed. Okay. One of the comments here about the minority views being forced onto the majority who have no voice. I'm unclear what the minority views are or who the majority are who have no voice. But actually, when we talk about the LGBTQ community, it's not a minority, is it?
It's becoming not. I mean, it is because, like, you know, a minority is not the majority, and you know, we won't be the majority. But
it's not a small minority where you would think where it's
No.
vanishingly small that we don't need to worry about any of you people. You three ladies can all just, you know, shush. You're the small minority in the corner. It's not, is it? It is a proportion of our community in every community around the world.
Yeah, massively. And it does depend on the legislation and freedoms you have in whatever part of the world that you're in. And also it's reflective of age. So, you know, we did a survey last year of over 65-year-olds and it drilled down to about 1% of the respondents that we got. And that just shows what stigma, shame, bullying, making people hide who they are, not educating people, etc. causes. It causes shame. It causes people not to be able to be open. It causes people probably to live singly. That's not really a word,
It causes
but, you know,
trauma. We know that because we've seen it through Liberate. And a good deal of Ellie's work is supporting people who have been traumatised because they haven't been able to be the person that they feel they are. And at the end of the day, we want everybody to feel that they can be safe to be who they are. There's no fear of the LGBTQ community trying to impose or will on them. And I think that is what it comes down to, isn't it? It's the false idea that that young children are being exposed to a kind of immoral sexuality, and that is what I'm challenging here today.
I think one of the things I've been thinking just off the back of this is about, you know, the terminology, sexual orientation. So the word's already in there. So that jump to sex that we discussed earlier. But I think again, people that are heterosexual don't realise that that's their sexual orientation as well, because it's the norm, it's the majority, you know, in those inverted commas. I just don't think that terminology is actually helpful anymore, because, as I said earlier, there are plenty of LGBT relationships where I'm sure, you know, we're just settling down to watch a bit of Netflix in the evening and then in bed by 9:30. You know, it's not all out raving, partying and sex madness, basically. I'm sorry to disappoint people.
I mean, one of the comments here is that it should be a discussion with the child's parents at an appropriate age. the title LGBTQ is about sexuality and more. What gives that parent the experience or the understanding to discuss some of these issues? You know, I wouldn't teach my children chemistry. I've got no idea. You know, I work in with some charities, and we work with people who have lived experience, and they're called experts by experience because they've experienced it. Therefore, they are the expert in that. I don't think I'd even want to teach LGBTQ stuff to my kids. I'd say to Ellie, can I pick your brains? You know, I'm not an expert. It's a huge arena. And at an appropriate age, what age is that? You know, 18, 16, 14?
Also, I think, you know, I've had people say before, I've seen comments online, you know, how am I supposed to explain it to my children? Some people love men, some people love women. It doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. You know, and people overly confuse stuff. You know, I remember the most wonderful conversation I had with my goddaughter, who was like 4 at the time, and I mentioned, and you know, so this is going back like 20 years ago, and I mentioned my girlfriend, and she looked at me and she went, "You can't have a girlfriend, you're a girl." And I went, "Yes, I can." And she said, "No, you can't." I said, "Yes, I can." She went, "Okay then." And that was it.
I mean, I had a really similar conversation with my son when I explained it to him. I don't even know if it might have been you or it was a friend. You know, they've got a girlfriend, but they're a girl. It's like, yeah, well, sometimes girlfriends have girlfriends and sometimes boys have boyfriends. Okay, can I have a biscuit? That was the extent of the conversation.
The worry is always from the parent, and I used to see it when I used to teach. If the boy played with a doll, if the boy showed any interest in wearing the high heels in the dressing up corner, the mum never had a problem, but it was the dad who didn't like it. And this kind of smacks of that to me, that kind of fear of if you expose a young child to anything other than a straight relationship, they are going to somehow or maybe or possibly turn out gay. And again, that comes round just to prejudice because, you know, so what if they did?
But I think as well, like it's good to point out that I think if you think about, if we talk about sexuality, if that's classed as sexualising children, we have to look at about straight relationships and when we introduce those. And literally from the minute like young kids are, you know, babies are born, you've got people going, "Oh, this is your new boyfriend to a girl. When are you two going to get married?" Taking pictures together. You know, they'll do things like, you know,
have you got a boyfriend yet?
That is the majority of people. But like that is ingrained into us all the time. And when you don't feel that way, and you're kind of like, well, you know, maybe I want a girlfriend, not a boyfriend, and everyone's telling you, you know, like it's really like traumatizing to young brains to have that, you know, to just sort of drummed in, because then you have to go, hang on, I'm different. You know, and I wish we got to a point where we didn't have sort of any of those assumptions, but I think we'll always have it because the majority of people will be heterosexual, you know, so we'll always have that conversation.
I think we'll have it less and less if young people that I know and who I speak to are anything to go by. You know, they don't need us here to sit and discuss this. They're just getting on with it. And they see their options as options. They don't even say that they need to label themselves. They just see the world in a very clear way that they can choose and that they don't have to be straight, pan, bi, you know, whatever. I might choose later in life. I don't know, Mum. Go away. I'm trying to, you know, watch this video or something. It's not even interesting to them. And I cannot wait for them all to grow up, you know, and have their own kids and have their own discussions with their next generation, because that it's going to be a lovely, lovely thing, but we just need to make sure that we don't slip backwards. And sadly, those comments on that post just really made me so worried.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Joni. I mean, my son's generation, his friends, which are ever similar to some of, you know, they're just wonderful and they're not bothered about really any of this. And it's not, but what if you change your mind? Like, they're like, yeah, I probably will. I'm changing my mind all the time. I'm finding my way and my options are open and it's great. And I cannot wait until they're the ones in charge. But meanwhile, we need to hold the line for them.
Yeah, we do. I love that. We do need to hold the line because they're young people. And there was another allegation made about Liberate, that Liberate is condoning the use of hormones to minors.
No, I think it said we promoting.
I mean, that's wrong. That's inaccurate. That's wrong. My
challenge to that person would be, when have we ever said that? When have we ever, like we completely support young trans people getting gender-affirming care. That does not mean that we support puberty blockers. The medical profession decide what care transgender people get, no matter what age that they are. And all we ever do is just provide information of actually what is available out there, what routes people can do to get the support that they need. I would challenge that person to find anywhere where that comment could be made.
There are safeguarding procedures in place so that nobody can force a young child to grow a pair of breasts, for instance. There are these awful images that come to mind, and I think, have they ever had a conversation with a medical professional or with an educationalist or with somebody who is trans or somebody who's LGBT? Let's sit down and talk about it, because you'd probably be really interested in finding out what goes on.
I've always said to everyone, I'm completely open for anyone to ask me any questions about any of the work that we do. And I will be 100% open. We get more scrutiny than absolutely any group of people doing work in education, doing stuff in the community. Everything we do gets overly scrutinised. So we are not only overly cautious, we want to protect people, we want to support people. We go over and above what we need to do all the time to make sure people are supported, accepted.
And safeguarded.
Safeguarded.
Absolutely.
I said earlier, one of my colleagues did some number crunching going through the post and looking at comments that were, so the likes, so, the emojis with the thumbs up, laughing face, a love heart and all these things. So on the original post on our Facebook page, so where we said that there was the headline, proud to be an author, and Sarah Hagger-Holt, the LGBTQ author, was coming to Guernsey to do the creative writing lessons. 49 love hearts, 31 likes, 28 anger emojis, 5 laughing, 3 cares, 2 cries. That was initially within 24 hours. So actually initially the response to the story seemed to be quite positive.
See, I would say that was quite depressing in itself. Okay. People don't realise that we still have to put up with the anger emojis, the crying emojis, the laughing emojis. It's really wearing. There's not much that can make me feel kind of too depressed these days, but that's not brilliantly positive in itself, is it? But it did get worse.
But this was what I was going to say. So the comments then from both sides. And actually, I think, Ellie, it was you that mentioned it before, not a good advert for Guernsey. And there were comments from people who presumably aren't in the island who said, well, I will never come to Guernsey after reading these comments.
After reading these
comments, I will never come to Guernsey.
It's just...
I had somebody say, this is exactly why I read one, this is exactly why I left Guernsey. It puts the island in a terrible light, which isn't actually the case. Most people are hugely accepting and warm and friendly and don't have an issue.
But what I noticed on those comments were a few people who I had never seen comment before, and I kind of knew them as partners or ex-partners of people that I used to know. I thought, where's that for you come from? How come you're suddenly being very vocal about that? And it's just making bold those people who are already of a certain age, who are already, certain prejudices. No, well, this person was of a certain age, or older, and emboldening that kind of that again. I'm going to use the word hate speech, because it actually is hate speech.
So I just we were talking before, so people feel empowered, so to peddle hate speech, essentially, which is what it is, because it's calling for the removal of sort of visibility and rights of people and be quiet, we don't want to hear about you, sort of thing. And I think at the beginning of this conversation, you asked me about the police presence at Pride, and there is a global rise in anti-LGBT rhetoric, hatred online. It's stirred up by the media, sadly, as well, especially around trans people. And I had a call from the police 2 days before Pride, and they said, nothing to worry about, but we are going to have the armoured response vehicles out this year. And they've said because global protocol has now called for that to happen at Pride events. They said they didn't have any specific threat, anything like that, but they had the bomb disposal and all that kind of stuff on standby very close to where Pride was. And that's the first time they've ever done that, and that just shows you the global rise. And I'm really sorry, but people who write things like this and comment on things like this are directly responsible for stirring up hatred.
They are, and we can't get complacent. And I think Guernsey thinks, oh, well, we're all past that now, you know, we're all accepting now. Well, actually, no, we're not. And we really need to be on guard.
I think I've made the comment before. I was shocked by these comments and the level of interest in the story, believing that Guernsey was an inclusive community. I didn't attend Pride. I was at another event that day. I thought, oh, the pictures look lovely. It looks like everyone had a great day. Isn't this wonderful? And then it reminds you, something like this really reminds you, actually, this is the need for events like Pride.
And I think it's really important that while we're discussing this, obviously it's really negative, disappointing. People have seen it and said, I'm not going to, come to Guernsey, which is really awful to hear. Actually, Pride is a fantastic day. It's full of love, it's full of support, it's full of allyship, and it's full of fun and
it brings
sparkles.
Yeah.
But and people do say, well, why do you need to do it anymore? They essentially say you've got equal rights because you can get married, and it probably is at least deemed unacceptable to beat gay people up in the street nowadays. But we're still balancing on a knife edge, and this shows it. And this is the answer to why we still need Pride and why we still need to do these things, because of this sort of rhetoric and response.
And we're lucky that we can demonstrate, because as we know, there were still 76 countries?
No, it's reduced. It's come down to 58.
58 countries.
68.
68 countries where it is illegal to be gay,
and
punishable.
12 you can be sentenced to death.
Well, yeah, exactly. So, I have to be careful where I go on holiday, because I could be killed for my existence. So we haven't really got there yet, have we? And we need to keep pushing, and we need to keep spreading our messages of learning, listening, talking, and just engaging with the people that you might think are your enemies, because we all are on the same side at the end of the day. We all want everyone to be okay.
Yeah, and I think it's really important. I was listening to the podcast about David Rebillard earlier that you guys did, and that there's a whole lost generation of LGBT people because they are no longer with us. They didn't live to tell their stories because of the AIDS epidemic. It's really important that we remember history. Like anything, Pride is a party, it's a celebration, but also it's about remembering the history and making sure things don't repeat themselves, as Joni's saying about, Section 28. It was all started from literature, all started from a book. We've got book bannings in the US, etc., etc. It is a danger.
Well, it's happening there, isn't it? It's already happening there.
So it's really important to have an event where all of those things, they might not be, overtly written down or on a banner or whatever, but it encompasses a lot more than just, you can get married nowadays.
And I think with what you said about that lost generation, I'm a strong believer that Section 28 stopped thousands and thousands of young gay men getting educated about their sexual health, and it directly led to their death. So hiding that information from school-aged people is not going to cause anything positive. And I'm not going to stand here, and I don't think any of the Liberate team will, and let that happen.
Because by not sharing that information, by not educating all of our young people, it's not going to stop them existing.
No, not representing people, I think, is key, isn't it? Yeah. And there is representation throughout the world via social media and via magazines and via, all the different channels that young people have access to. So I think it's also a very naive view to think that teachers hold so much power that young people listen to. They're just a tiny slice of the information that young people are getting. And isn't it better that education is done from is given from a good lived experience source from the national curriculum, rather than listening to all sorts of nonsense? I mean, oh gosh, I really shouldn't talk about my kids on here, they'll kill me, but I remember listening to some of the stuff that one of my kids said about sex, and I thought, what on earth are you talking about? And go, so-and-so told me, they'd seen it online. I said, let's get things right. Let's get the facts out there. Let's not dilly-dally with fear and misinformation and kind of thinly veiled bigotry. Let's just have conversations. And I keep saying it, I'm really regretful that it's a very one-sided discussion today, because I love challenges and I love to talk. I don't think you could call it a debate, because I will never debate a human right, and LGBTQ plus people have a right to exist. So I will never debate our existence, but I would love to hear some of the answers to some of the questions that Tina has had.
And we'd love to have that conversation, like with people.
And not in a confrontational way. Just you don't know what you don't know, do you? You know, I didn't know any trans people before I joined Liberate. I had no idea. And through discussions, through listening, you get to understand a little bit more. I wouldn't have known that if I'd not had that discussion. I might have had a point of view based on my own preconceptions, not based on somebody's lived experience. And I think that is the danger, and that's what we want to avoid.
I think humanising things is so important in all subjects, walks of life, etc. It's so easy in your own bubble, your own mind, to get yourself worked up about a certain subject, group of people, whatever. And when you're sat behind a keyboard, say things that you would not say if you were sat across this table. You might still voice something in a curious manner or ask a question and have a bit more of a, but it will be more of a conversation than the way these comments come through. And that is because when you are sat behind a screen at a keyboard, there is just no human element to it whatsoever. That's why you see so many people change their minds on this when it becomes their granddaughter or, you know, their son or whoever. Obviously not all people do, sadly, but you do see. And actually I think it is particularly older generations, grandparents, quite often surprise you in the way they respond to the younger generations, because I think they've seen what it's like growing up in times where people haven't been able to do that, and they really relish now that the younger generations can. And it's wonderful, some of the stories you see of older generations just being a lot more sort of, everyone just be who they are now, you know, because there's love. There's love between you and that person. It's already a human thing. And I think there's a great phrase, isn't there, that's, you know, be careful who you hate, because it might be someone you love. You know, if you're going around hating on LGBT people or any other group for that matter, you know, someone near and dear to you might be hiding that from you.
Yeah.
I think as well there's a lot of misinformation around, especially around trans people and trans identities, that people like just don't even question when they read it online. So you would assume that there's this explosion of young people on puberty blockers, and that all of a sudden they've made them illegal and that they've been removed and nobody can access them at all. You know, for the past 3-4 years, they've only been available via a trial if you go via, a youth gender identity clinic, of which there is one with the NHS. Because of the dreadful service with that, there was a private one that opened that had the ability to be able to also prescribe puberty blockers, and they basically put a law in place that said they couldn't do that, so they had to be part of this trial and via the NHS. Fine, that's what they're doing, better research and things like that. But you would assume, based on that and the conversations going on, that there are thousands of young trans kids on puberty blockers. There's about 100. That is it across the whole of the UK. You would assume that our prisons are teeming with trans women, or our female prisons are teeming with trans women. There's about 300 trans people in the UK in prisons at the moment. They are split approximately equally, about half and half male, trans males and trans females, and only 6 trans females are in female prisons. It's a conversation about such a small minority.
It's a fear again, which it kind of like really speaks to some people, and it's unbidden, and it's not right. Men don't need a uniform or a dress to attack women. Men don't need to pretend to be a woman to rape a woman. Men don't need to pretend to be anything other than they are to inflict domestic abuse on their partner. Society is already doing a very good job of abusing and harassing and upsetting women. Again, the default is it's the trans women who are the danger to society. And it's just not accurate statistically, factually, at all.
It's just nonsense.
It is nonsense.
As you're all talking and I'm listening and learning myself personally, it all does come back to education, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Just
Through
listening.
having these
you know.
conversations, people...
And I think
that's how you learn.
And I think that's why people are so fearful about education in schools, because all of a sudden, I think unfortunately, it questions maybe some of the things that they've taught in their household. So you go into senior school particularly, I'd say, because there's not much mentioned in junior school, and then all of a sudden maybe the school is giving a slightly different message to what they've given at home, and therefore there's fear around, well, hang on, if our children begin to question that, what else are they going to question? And what else maybe do they think that our views are different to maybe more wider society? So I can see that there's fear around that, and I completely understand that. But let's have those conversations. We can't just bury the issue and try and avoid it. We did that for our generation, we've come out not too badly scathed, some of us, but the generation before that, they're terribly scarred. You've got people that have hidden who they are for all their life, and it destroys you from the inside if you've got to hide who you are every day.
Is it? If you're not being yourself and living your life.
But my parents are, kids of the war generation, and the language that they used. I remember my grandparents, just the whole kind of way that they talked about gay people. It was appalling, and that's only like 2 generations down we are now.
We've come such a long way in a short time, so it's scary for people, and that's why we've got this pushback at the moment.
It is. It's the fear of the unknown, and my message would be, please come and have a chat, come and learn, come and talk, come and talk to someone with lived experience, and I'd love the opportunity to do that.
But the education piece is so important, and we all know that, even if we really zoom out from this one subject we're on, preventative health measures. That's what it, that's why we're teaching kids to try and eat healthily from younger ages, and eat a broad range of food or be active or whatever it might be. It's about embedding messages early. We all know that. But again, always at the appropriate level, because that's how we teach children so they can grasp messages. And it's clear that we have still got plenty of people around that didn't receive that education, which is why this gulf of knowledge is leading to fear, misinformation, misunderstanding. But I don't think that absolves people of responsibility completely. Sure, the opportunity to educate themselves is out there, and you also have every opportunity you like not to speak on subjects that you're not educated on.
As referenced earlier in the podcast, this is a statement provided to the Bailiwick Express by Amelia Carlson. Parents have voiced their concerns about an author advertised as being LGBTQ+ children's fiction author visiting Guernsey schools. It's important to remember the meaning of the acronym LGBTQ and specifically the adult concepts it represents, sexual orientations, and further, transsexualism and queerness, which are elements of gender theory ideology. Gender theory is facing more scrutiny than ever after the revelations of harm caused to thousands of children by often sterilising use of hormone therapy and surgical intervention in order to treat them for a discrepancy between their purported gender and their biological body. Hormone therapy for transgender minors is a therapy explicitly endorsed by Liberate, which they are campaigning to make available in Guernsey, according to statements on their website. We parents who are concerned about this wish for all children to be embraced as they are, without being suggested repeatedly that they may have a specially labelled gender identity based on their personalities and preferences, nor creating the association of gender with a divisive special status. An otherwise totally innocuous fiction writing event can be a source of great concern when gender theory is entangled with it, as it was advertised in the Bailiwick Express headline. We will continue to push for gender theory to be removed from Guernsey schools so that children can have a neutral and fully inclusive academic environment where all are treated equally and respectfully, protecting all of the children's and parents' well-being and their lawful rights. Response to argument that the author did not teach gender theory. Why this author was selected to visit and advertised as LGBTQ. Importantly, she is a winner of a Radical Children's Fiction Award given to those who radically push boundaries with the themes and topics in their work. and the topic of the workshop included inclusivity and representation, which are gender theory keywords relating to gender identities and their need to be specially recognised. She was one of 2 separate authors, both advertised for their LGBTQ status, both serving our schools. Neutrality and refraining from hotly controversial positions is necessary in all of public schooling to be truly inclusive to people of all faiths, all ideologies, and all family backgrounds. Response to the argument that gender-critical views are homophobic or transphobic. Many homosexuals do not subscribe to gender theory, and conflating sexuality and sexual preferences with gender theory is an inaccuracy. No element of the gender-critical position ascribes any negative attributes to any sexualities, preferences, or personalities. We simply reject the concept of self-identified gender and believe its application to children is harmful and confusing for them. We also do not support explicitly discussing sexualities and sexual behaviour with prepubescent children and consider it an intolerable safeguarding risk. Response to proposition that schools are responsible to make sure students learn about gender identities and gender inclusivity. Please reference the Parental Rights and Responsibilities Law of Guernsey for evidence that parents are not just encouraged but required to oversee all aspects of their child's well-being and upbringing. This includes those who believe in and those who do not believe in gender theory.